Okay, we are going to talk about how to create our monogram final comp in Illustrator. So I'm just going to create a new. And I'm choosing letter. It doesn't matter. You can do vertical or horizontal. I'm going to do horizontal. Now I'm only requiring that you redo your best comp. But for the monogram, sometimes it's still fun to experiment and play around with different fonts and things in the computer. So you might have multiple that you end up using. So for the monograms, just like with the type word illustrations, you're going to use your type tool. However, there's a few new things I want to teach you about the type tool. So with these, when you're in type, remember you can look at your font up here. You can go to type and look at your fonts here. You can look at recent fonts you've used and look here. So we're unable to download any fonts from the internet, and that's usually what I like to do to get some really cool, like swirly handwritten type fonts. But so we're kind of stuck with these ones, which is kind of a bummer. But you'll have to look through and find some that you like. And there are a lot of variety here, so that's the good thing. Okay, I'm going to just try this one. Okay, so I am going to click and type. My initials are MMC. So if you have the rough that you know you want to do, you can place it up in the corner like you did before. I'm going to just type out this M. Remember, if you hold Shift, that will keep it in perfect proportion. I don't necessarily want to stretch it. So make sure you hold Shift. And instead of stretching it out, I'm going to actually change the size up here because I want to make my 3 letters the same size. I just want to keep it kind of uniform. So another way to do this, so I'm making it larger, or I could stretch this out, hold Shift. I could copy and paste this or hold down Alt and duplicate it. And actually my middle initial is M as well. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to double click on this and do C for my last name. Now I didn't type them right in a row for this one because I want to be able to move them around. So I can kind of go up here and I can play with this. So you've kind of already done this with your sketches, but generally this is the kind of thing we do when you're kind of playing around in Illustrator. It's so much easier to kind of see the variations with when you actually have the font in front of you. I could do like just one like this. Okay, so one new thing that I want to teach you is you can start to group these together. If you have something and you like the look of it, drag over both of them. Just like click off of it and drag over both of them. And if you go to Object, you can go down to Group. Control G is the key command, and I like to use my key commands. So drag over, Control G, and then what that does is it makes it so it's now one object. When you move it around, it doesn't come apart. If I want it to come apart, I can right click and ungroup it, but this kind of helps keep things locked together. So if I like the way it looks and I don't want to move it apart, it groups it together. All right, so maybe I try this, I copy and paste it or hold Alt to duplicate it. And then maybe I go in my type font and I try like several different fonts. Now I might want to ungroup this one and like move the letter. That's a nice C to just have on its own. Some letters too, with different fonts, you might want to try lowercase versus uppercase for some of them. So I can kind of play and see with what I like. And I like to have overlapping sometimes, like having the edges touch so it looks like it's all one. Maybe I will go through. See, it's kind of giving me a hassle to, the little M is behind the big C. So you might have to arrange and send the C to the back in order to get to that little M. Sometimes that can be annoying too. But I can kind of play with how that works. I'm not a huge fan of this one, but that's okay. Just kind of play around, and when you're done, you can even drag it off to the side and have them scattered around your page and just put your final one on the page. So you can try different fonts, try different sizes, try stacking. I like to type my letters separately. Just my M again. I'm going to I'm going from my type tool back to my arrow tool to select it. Remember, you don't want to like drag out a text box and then type your letter. If you do that, when you go back to your arrow tool, it won't scale the size for you like this one will. So that text dragging out a text box is just for if you have a paragraph of text you want to insert. Otherwise, if I want to manipulate my letters, I always make sure to just click on the page to do that. So I'm going to change this to a different, just simpler font, something like this. Okay, so this is a more modern font, a little cleaner. Sometimes I've seen really cool monograms that have like one of the stems of the letters extended down. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you could literally draw a rectangle to do that. Sorry, my computer is being a little slow. I'm going to make that a C. So you could draw a rectangle to do that. Well, that's kind of cool. I'm going to group it, copy, paste it. Then I have copy, paste. Okay, I'm going to ungroup this one. So what I was talking about before is you could do something like this and like have the stem of it elongated, but sometimes it's hard to get it to completely line up. Like if you look, there is like a little narrower area. So instead, I want to show you how to manipulate the letters. So after you have your letter typed, you can click on a letter. And if you go up to type at the top, you can create outlines. Creating outlines makes this so it's no longer a text. Like you can't change the M now, it stays an M. So it's no longer changeable text, but it now makes it into paths. So now I can take my white arrow tool, I can round these. I can double click on a line segment. Oh, and you got to get right on the line. So I usually zoom in for this. Double click. Is it going to work? Yeah. And if I hold shift, it'll be perfectly straight down. And I can manipulate my letters like that. So that's double clicking on the line segment. You have to get right in the right spot. It can be a little bit annoying. And this letter is not as wide as the M, so I'm just going to purposely distort this. And you can kind of play around with that. I use my keyboard arrows a lot after things are selected to kind of nudge them and move things around. If you want to make a letter thicker, you can always put an outline on it, like a black outline or stroke, and play with that. Like if I want the M to kind of match up with the C because I stretched it out. Just kind of play with positive and negative space. I don't know, I'm not loving it, but it's okay. That's why you kind of experiment. That's kind of cool. Okay, so creating outlines turns, it's under type, create outlines, it turns that letter into paths now. So you can go in and completely change the shape of it. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is using a shape. So if you use a shape, I would make sure that you use it and incorporate your letters into the shape. Don't just put a shape behind your initials just for the heck of it. Make sure, it's used, in a meaningful way. So what I mean by that is, okay, I'm going to take a circle. I'm going to take another circle. Let's fill this one with white. Oops. Undo that. I'm going to go in my arrow tool. Like you could center this. Remember, if you grab them both, you can go to this alignment feature. Oh, it's aligning it to the artboard. I want to align it to the shape selection. So I'm just aligning the circle in the middle of the circle. You could do something like that. But I kind of like to do things a little bit not so symmetrical. So you could do something like that. Look at that, created like a moon. And then I could like lay my letters on here. Oops. Now my M, I drew that before I drew the circle. So it's there, but it's behind the circle. So I'd have to right click, arrange, and bring to the front. But that could be really cool. I'm going to double click on this C. It's part of this group. Anytime you double click on something, it will bring you into this isolation mode. When you're in isolation mode, it isolates just one thing. So I'm double clicking on the C, everything else is like ghosted out. And I'm just copying and pasting it. And then you have to hit escape or click this back arrow to get out of isolation mode. But it allowed me to grab that C out of my group when I double clicked on it. So now, oops. Oh, it's still grouped to that. I didn't think it would do that. So I can right click and ungroup just so I can move it out of there. Oh, and it's behind because it was from something I drew before I drew the circles. So I'm bringing it to the front. So sometimes you just have to get comfortable and don't panic. Think through, okay, wait, is that there? Is it behind there? What's going on? So something like that. So if you're using a shape, just make sure that you're doing it intentionally and it's going to enhance your design. I always do that. I draw a circle and then I click to move it, but I'm not on the arrow tool. So I gotta put it on the arrow tool. And look, if I have a circle like this, I could even like put on my white circle a black outline with white fill. And then I could take this outer circle, click on it. Oops, just gotta get a little further off. There we go. I can do let's do a white fill on this one with a black outline. Just different ways to get multiple circles. You could try different thicknesses. I would try to keep your line thickness on circles or little elements, embellishments, the same thickness. Make sure it follows along with your font. So with this one, if I'm using this font goes a little bit from thick to thin. I might even want to like do something like this with my circles. You know, just to keep it consistent, like I said, you want your shape to kind of work with the letters that you choose. Remember, when you do this variation here, there is a stroke panel over here, and this will allow you to switch where that thickness falls. Maybe for this one, I want to put a black fill on it. And then maybe I take my initials here. Oops, I forgot I ungrouped them. Let's take these ones. Let's make these white. And let's put them in here. And remember, I made these letters first, so I'm going to right click and bring them to the front. So really, we're just playing with space. And look how I have it kind of going off the edge. And then I can group it together. With any of your letters, you can use the pen tool or the pencil tool and embellish them, like add different things like, okay, I'm going to just draw something like that. Make the outline here, maybe make the thickness the same, and I could play with how it connects. So it looks something like that. That looks a little rough, but you get the gist. You can have it like lined up so that it works. Maybe make it a little bit thicker so it flows right into the end of that C. Better yet, if you're doing a swirl, remember there is a swirl tool here where you could like do a little swirl, maybe a smaller swirl than that. Play with the thickness and the uniformity. See, I wouldn't put a thick to thin swirl on something like this because there's no line variation in this font. But the one right here I chose has a line variation. So it goes from thick to thin. So that's why I kind of chose a letter like, or a symbol that goes from thick to thin. So I could kind of play with that. But it should be a part of it. It shouldn't be separate. There are actual symbols. If you go to Window and Symbols, Illustrator has symbols. They have a whole window of symbols like this. But you can only use black and white in this assignment, no color, because we're going to turn these monograms into stamps. And they're just going to need to know what's going to be raised on the stamp, what's going to be reseated, so it can pick up ink. So just black and white. So if we go to this little stamp, this little symbol library, anything that says Vector Pack, we'll open up these little things. Those are all black and white. So one of the ones, the Regal pack, vector pack is kind of cool. It's little like shields and stuff like that. These are all royalty free. You can use them without, you know, copyright rules or things like that. There's also a floral vector pack, which is kind of cool. It has like these kind of embellishments. But remember, make sure it goes with the font that you're using. And, you know, don't just randomly choose like this symbol wouldn't go with this really, it's very ornate, traditional, thick to thin lines. It wouldn't go with this really blocky text. And if you're going to use it, you know, make sure that it goes with what you want to do. So I can transform these and reflect them. I can just go with my black arrow tool and like flip things, rotate things, and incorporate it into my letters. So maybe something like this, because it's really bold and blocky, could go. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Sometimes I accidentally do things though, and then it gives me an idea. Like I was going to put this on the top of my M, but maybe it would look cool if I just not clicking in the right spot. Come on. Here we go. Had it crooked like that. It's kind of cute. I'm going to get rid of this guy. You could use this and put like white letters on the inside. But this is where I just try lots of variations. Copy and paste that one. And then maybe I'll do one with it. The crown, like not crooked. I might make it the same size as that too. But you get the gist. So there's all sorts of things here. These little libraries, you have lots of choices. The vector packs are the ones that are not colored. Okay, and then there's one other thing I want to show you, warping. So you learned how to create an outline so you can like warp, but this is a different way. So if I do MMC, and I typed it right in a row that time, because I want to warp these. So I have to go back to my arrow tool, and I'm going to go to Effect and down to Warp, and I can choose any of these options. Move it out of the way so you can see this and click Preview. And look, I can see here, these will do some cool effects to my letters. The ones I like for logos in particular are like inflate. And you can change how much it's inflated or which way it's inflated and things like that. It'll like put it off center or keep it in the center. So you can kind of play with that. But you can kind of just roll through and experiment with them. Bulge is another one. It's a little different. I like that one too. So I'm going to hit OK. And then you can like, it gives you a kind of a little ghost of what it used to look like. And then you can go in and maybe you incorporate like a shape with this or something. I'm going to send this behind. So right click, arrange, send to the back. And now when I click on this, I'm going to make this white. Can't see it because it's black text on black shape, but maybe I have this go like off the edge or something. That could be kind of cool. It doesn't have to be in the center though. Remember, you could do something like this too. At the bottom, I like to sometimes have text come off of a shape so it looks like it's cut out. So see, I don't even have the line at the bottom. So that looks like it's kind of cut out of there. And then I could just play around with this shape. There's one more thing with distorting as well, or warping. So if I click, there's up here, you can also start to distort, and this will warp it too. So see this little symbol here? This will give you those warp options, but when it does it here, it puts these little points on the warp. So you can hit OK. So this one's a little different. It does warp it, but look, you can now go to your white arrow tool and like completely distort this. So this could be really cool for certain designs that you're doing. So that does the warp with the little grid over top of it. And you can get to that by that little symbol up in the corner. After you type something, you go back to your arrow tool. See, it wasn't there unless I went back to the arrow tool. Then it's here. I can also go to object. There's so much here, I know. And down under object, there's something called envelope distort. And you can make with warp or make with mesh. That's another way to get there. When you get here, you can choose how many points you want to be able to distort. So let's do 4. It does, this one even put more stuff over top of it. And I can, if I go to my black arrow tool, it's just going to stretch it out. If I go to my white arrow tool, I can click on these points, double click, and really start to move these around. There's just so much you can do. So you can really start to manipulate it. For our monograms here, we want things to be readable. So don't warp it too much for this, but I just wanted you to know that it's there. It's something you might use in the future. So when you're done and you get your final one, you could save this page, just file, save as, and make it, call it like your name and mono practice or something. Just save it. And then I would take your favorite one, your most successful one that you think works the best. I'm going to copy it. And I'm just going to go to File and New, and I'm going to paste it on its own page. For this, let's make it vertical because my monogram's pretty tall. And I want to get it really big on here. Paste. I'm going to grab over the whole thing and shift, drag that up, and get it pretty full on the page. Okay, to save this, I'm going to get it pretty full. I didn't group this one together, I don't think. Get it like full size on the page here. Kind of center it on the page. Get it as big as it'll go. Because we are going to save this as a PNG. And remember, that's going to make it pixeled again or pixelated. So you want to have as high quality as you can. So make it as large as you can on the page. And for this one, you can save it as an Illustrator file again. And then on a final, something like that is fine. And then we're going to save it again. So I've got this here. We're going to export it as a PNG. Make sure you click that Use Artboards. And for this one, because we can put it on a t-shirt or on a stamp, we can do a transparent background. So instead of leaving it white, let's make it transparent so we can easily place it on a mock-up or on a stamp or something like that. Make sure it's 300 ppi. Hit OK. And then it should be set.